The word Al-Ghazal means someone who weaves cotton. So his reference went back to that. And the other reason that scholars give is that his small, not even village, his small town, subdivision, not village, small area, in Urdu they call it basti. You know, there's basti, then there's gaon, so that small basti that he lived in was called Al-Ghazal, Al-Ghazla. So now from Al-Ghazla became Al-Ghazal, which this small area was in the province of Khurasan in Iran. And what we gain from both of these things, the fact that, you know, his father, and most ulama say both are true, that they were from Al-Ghazla and his father was someone who used to weave cotton. What we get from this is something so profound, which is someone from such simple background, from, like, honestly to say, in the middle of nowhere, with, you know, nowadays, like, we appreciate it more now, Ustad. Like, nowadays we are all in the business of getting ourselves out there. You know, like, whether on social media, we have to do work, we have to get ourselves out there, brand ourselves. And I'm not one to speak about whether that's a great thing or a bad thing, but I'm just saying that a fact is that these people never did that. They were just trying to get themselves out there in front of Allah. Right? Allah noticed them. And subhanAllah, I'm telling you, this man, like Imam Al-Ghazali, on the day of judgment, he's going to be like, bro, we learned from it. No, you probably talking to some other guy. It's not me. They came from such small backgrounds, humble beginnings. They just did it for the sake of Allah. 10 to 12 years of his life after his initial life, when he was born in 450, initial portion of his life, he was popular. Then after that, he just left for 10, 12 years. He went to Sham, he went to Palestine, he went for Hajj. Then he finally came back and he started teaching. These people were just doing it for the sake of Allah. And look, from that background, poor, he says about himself that my dad, his father passed when he was 6 years old. He was an orphan. And you see, he said that the person who was a caretaker for me, he put me in a boarding school because the boarding school was the only place I could be fed. You know, breakfast, lunch, dinner, madrasas, they take care of you. And so I stayed there, and the caretaker told us, like, look, if you end up becoming like a scholar, like, you'll be taken care of through gifts. People will give you money, people will take care of you. So, like, this is probably a better idea just to do this. So Imam Al-Ghazali, he says, طَلَبْنَا الْعِلْمَ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ فَأَبَى إِلَّا أَن يَكُونَ لِلَّهِ. That initially we set forth to study knowledge for other intentions, but ilm was so pure that it forced us to make our intention pure. And then our path became straight. You know, and you know, one of the scholars, he writes so beautifully that his father, Imam Ghazali's father, Muhammad, he was an average person, just someone not a very knowledgeable man, but he had love for ulama. That's why Abdullah ibn Abbas, he says, you can only find yourself in 4 categories. Don't be in the 5th category. كن عالما أو متعلما أو مستمعا أو محبا ولا تكن خامسا أن تبغض العلم وأهله فتهلك. He says, look, you either have to be a scholar, or you be a student of knowledge, or you be someone who attends gatherings like this. Mustami' means someone who frequents these gatherings. If you can't even do that, it's too difficult, your schedule is very cumbersome, you can't come to these programs, then be someone who loves scholars, someone who loves knowledge, someone who loves scholars, and serve them. Don't ever be in the 5th category past these 4 categories. And this is not in terms of who's better or not. Your life circumstances are different. Someone can't become a scholar, he shouldn't become a scholar, his circumstances are different. Imam Ghazali's father used to love ulama and serve them and feed them. And they say that because of his service of ulama, Allah made his children ulama. A khidmah, I say this all the time, like my mother and my father are not scholars. Ustad, of course your parents are not scholars either. You'll see a lot of scholars in America, their parents are not scholars. Their parents, Mufti Kamani is a great example of his parents are not even Muslim. And subhanAllah, you have these great scholars teaching us today. This is a small little Ihya al-Ulumuddin. How many chapters does Ihya al-Ulum have? 40 chapters. 40 chapters. This is a vacuum from the Masjid. Focus on me. So Ihya has 40 chapters. Why? Why do you think that, you ever read about this? It's interesting. It's 40 chapters because of the 40 days and nights that Musa Islam was given, he spent with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first chapter is Kitab al-Ilm, the chapter of knowledge. The last chapter is dhikr, of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the heart of the book is the akhlaq of the Prophet sallallahu. So that's how he structured his book. Like it starts with knowledge, and if you have knowledge and you went through the knowledge, all these chapters, and then you don't have the akhlaq of the Prophet sallallahu. You don't have the prophetic character. And if you have everything, but you don't have the awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like everything is with dhikr. So he ends with dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes people who are doing even the work of deen, they're practicing, they're teaching, but sometimes they find themselves, Shaykh Yusuf Kandari Rahman used to say that kabhi deendaron ki sabse bada parda apni deendari hi hoti hai. Sometimes your own religion and your religiosity becomes the barrier to grow. So dhikr keeps you growing. So this is a small background of Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayh. I think I should mention one thing, which is some of my favorite quotes. You have any favorite quotes of his, Ustadh?
Yeah, I do actually.
Go for it.
Ayyuha al-Walad, which is one of his shorter but more famous books towards the end of his life. One of his students wrote him basically asking for like what is like the essence of this all. And he was talking about some people. Honestly, one thing about Al-Ghazali, it's amazing, rahmatullahi alayhi, is that he's like relevant 1,000 years after his death. It's actually unreal. I literally cannot wait to meet him, inshallah, because I think like all of the Reddit, like Reddit, like
I don't know Reddit.
You know Reddit?
No.
Me either. I heard about it though. So like this crazy culture of like hyper analysis, like very like deep, like materialist philosophy, like everyone's challenging everything, and if something doesn't make sense, they're like, it doesn't make sense. In religion, they're like, why do I do this? Why do I wipe over my socks? Why do I do this? Show me, how does that make sense, right? And then these people really love when their religion lines up perfectly with their rationale, right? So in one of the lines, there was a person who was talking about how Imam Ghazali was referencing this person who was trying to make sense of the religion, and so he kept saying, oh, it's abrogated, which means like basically it's not relevant anymore. It doesn't apply today, right? It's mansukh. And then he said, bel, huwa al-qa'il, huwa al-mansukh. He said, the person saying this, you're abrogated. Which is kind of like someone saying like, that's stupid, and you're like, you're stupid. Which is why I really appreciated it, because he had a very sharp tongue. Not in a bad way, not in a reckless way. We use that phrase in English to describe like a person who's reckless. But remember, there's always a time for softness and there's always a time for strength. And Imam Al-Ghazali, whenever he engaged with people that had not the best interest, but the worst interest of Islam and of faith, and because he lived in a very tough time. And he had to really combat a lot of these prevailing ideologies and ideas. When he was with Muslims, when he was talking to Muslims, he was so soft, so gentle, so welcoming. When he spoke to scholars, which the Ihya is a book that's really, in a lot of ways, because it's in Arabic, there's a lot of indication, because he wrote a lot of his common books in Farsi and Persian, right? So the Alchemy of Happiness, for example, is meant to be read by like everybody. But some of his more advanced or intermediate books were meant for like the scholastic class of people, the learned people. And he was a little bit more tough on them. And then when he engaged with like the enemies, those people that wanted to try to like take out the legs of the faith from underneath it, he was so sharp. And I love that, because it teaches us that as people, we have to have ghira for our deen. We have to have this like strong, resolve and not jealousy, but like this, like, we're not going to compromise. We're not going to compromise. This is our deen. And this is why the Ihya is so powerful. One of my favorite quotes, when he calls someone abrogated.
Al-ilm bila amal junun.
Allahu Akbar.
Wal-amal bighari ilm ma yakun. That's the introduction to, I love that. He says, Al-ilm bila amal junun. Like knowledge without action is insanity. Right? It's just like, you just have this knowledge, you have all this information, but it doesn't get you up for tahajjud. Right? It doesn't push you to read Qur'an every single day. It doesn't push you to cry in front of Allah every single day. It doesn't make you read Salat al Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Like, man, come on, you know all this. Like we're at a point in our life now, like Shaykh, most, like the average person who goes to Jum'ah, the moment the khateeb starts with the first verse in hadith, they kind of know the whole topic.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so like now as khateebs, we have to be slick about things. Right? We're like, we're not gonna give you the ayah. Or we have to say something else. So al-ilm bila amal junun. That you have this information but you're not acting upon it, it's insanity. And then he says, وَالْعَمَلْ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ لَا يَكُونُ. But action without ilm doesn't happen.
Doesn't
like
exist.
it doesn't have the same effect, same impact. Like you have to know. It's not possible to get barakah of your clothes if you don't know the dua the Prophet used to read when he used to wear clothes. Like it could be you bought the clothes with halal money, everything is perfectly fine, but you don't know the dua. Like it's not the same as someone who knows the dua. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same. Look, you know one dua, knowing. It's not possible to be at the level of a person who knows. Like I was saying earlier, Shaykh, I sat with a scholar who spent maybe 8 minutes reading du'as after eating food. And basically what we just know, alhamdulillah, khalas, move on. Now yes, you know alhamdulillah, at'amana wa saqana wa jannal muslimin, khalas, good. But you think you're going to be equal to the person who knows 20 plus du'as from the Prophet himself sallam, that he used to recite after eating food? It's not possible. That person's gratitude is going to be another level. So that's why you have to continue to learn. It's not something that you have to become alim. No. These are things that you learn, it blesses you, benefits you. In ahsantum ahsantum li anfusikum. So this is one of my favorite lines of Imam Al-Ghazali that will segue right to your book. Inshallah you read, and whatever questions you have for me, you can throw at me. Bismillah.
You know, he was a very interesting person in that I feel like as a scholar, he was not afraid to say the things that needed to be said. And he was very comfortable being very honest with some of the challenges that were there in the ummah. One of the things that really bothered him in particular, rahmatullahi alayhi, was the contradiction between things that people said and things that people did or didn't do. And remember, Imam Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he's living in a time where the Muslims are the majority. So realize this, he's talking to a homogeneously Muslim society. So it's not like us when we write books, when we give lectures, our frame is to speak to Muslims that are living as a minority in a country. And that, whether or not we realize it, our subconscious, it's pushing out sometimes, different flavors and different styles. And we know this, right? Even though it's happening subconsciously. We're aware of it because this is our reality, right? And this is the way that we learn from our teachers as well. But imagine being in a society where everyone's Muslim. And what do you think the problem would be? And people actually till today still have this very same issue. For example, let me tell you a story to illustrate this issue, right? I remember one time I was on an airplane and I was heading towards the holy cities, Umrah. Raise your hand if you've been for Umrah in your life. Raise your hand, mashallah. Raise your hand if you have yet to go, raise your hand. Okay, inshallah, Miftaah, we're going to go with the group, inshallah. We'll make you guys come with. May Allah Ta'ala invite us all. Say Ameen.
Ameen.
It's an amazing experience. Really, really, it's an amazing experience. I use this phrase very carefully, out of this world. Obviously, geographically, it's on this world. But when you're there, you don't feel like you're a part of this world. Time is different. Everything is different. It's truly amazing. And for those of you who have gone, you know what I'm talking about. For those who have not yet gone, inshallah you'll be able to go. Your heart should yearn for it, and I'm sure it does. And as Americans, as people who live in America and that we have to travel, you have to spend, thousands of dollars. You have to get on a plane and travel for 12 plus hours, 13 hours. Then maybe you're taking a connection somewhere, and then you're connecting, and then you're going again, and then there's bus rides. I mean, from the time you leave Detroit, from the time you leave this city to the time you arrive in Medina or Mecca, it's probably going to be like 24 hours maybe, right? 24 hours. But when you get there, you're like, it was so worth it. I would do double, I would do triple that amount of time. It's so worth it. You start having these thoughts like, should I just live here? Should I just sell everything and live here? Right? I know they don't have Yemeni coffee shops here, but like, should I just live here? And you really will lie. You start to have these thoughts, right? Like, what if I just... And then something really interesting happens. And this is, again, for like those who are like from maybe a little bit more graduated in your travels, is you'll meet people that have relatively, compared to us, easy access to the Haramain. Like, meaning like they live either in Saudi Arabia, or they live in the Gulf, or they live in... And they can go there, it's like a 2-hour flight. Like I flew here from Dallas, it was 2.5 hours. Like you could go and fly there and make Umrah on a weekend and fly back home and go to work. Like if you're a doctor, engineer, teacher, you could just hop on a plane, go for Umrah and come back. Or spend a weekend in Medina. Amazing, right? So there was a time when I was flying and there was a girl who was next to me, astaghfirullah, but there was a girl who was next to me. And I put the pillow there.
No, you didn't.
Pillow parda, wallahi I did. Pillow parda. I said, don't cross. No. There was a girl who was next to me, she's from Saudi.
If it was Mufti Abdul Rahman, you put this in the middle.
So then, we were talking, and she was like, you know, where are you going? Because she noticed when you book these groups, you have everyone on your plane. So we all know each other. Like half the plane is like, hey, we're like tossing a football around. And so she's like, where are you guys going? She was asking me, like, where are you going? So then I said to her, we're going for Umrah. And she goes, from where? And I said, from everywhere. And I said, I'm going from Dallas. There's people from LA. There's people from Chicago. There's people from New York. I said, everywhere, all over America. And I said, where are you from? And she goes, well, I'm from Jeddah, but I'm studying in Boston. I said, oh, okay. So you grew up in Jeddah? She goes, yeah. I'm Saudi. I said, okay. She goes, you're just going for Umrah? And I said, yeah. She goes, for how long? I said, inshallah, 8-9 days. She goes, you're paying all that money to go for Umrah only? And I looked at her and I said, people went, like, they would pay double. Like for us to go and visit the Haramain and pray in Masjid Al-Haram, Masjid Nabawi, I said like, the disconnect was so real. And again, it's not all her fault because she grew up 1 hour drive away from the Kaaba, right? It's not all her fault. But there is a predominant issue that exists amongst certain areas of Muslim societies, which is what? Gar ki murgi, dal baraba.
Wow.
That's right, man. Listen, I come to Miftaah, I know where I'm coming. I know where I am. For those of you who are not Desi like me, I grew up in Chicago though, that's how I picked that one up. It means that the chicken that you eat at home or the chicken that is cooked at home is equivalent to like the lentils anywhere else. It's just like lentils. You know, like your mom would tell you, you're like, where are you going to eat? You're like, I'm going out with friends. She's like, but I cooked at home. You're like, yeah. But now when you get older, you're like, man, I miss mom's cooking, man, subhanAllah. So for her, like the idea of people taking their PTO and putting down $3,000 and going and spending time, to her, she's like, this is crazy. Like, I don't understand. Why wouldn't you just go? Because again, in the summer, where do all the Gulf Arabs go? They go to Europe. So they go to like Spain and Switzerland and this and that's vacation for them. But for us, I'm like, just give me 9 days. Give me 1 or 2 days in Mecca. Give me 6 or 7 days in Medina. I'm good. That's vacation for me. That's life. Imam Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he dealt with a similar phenomenon. That's why he called his book Ihya Ulumuddin, to revive the religious sciences. Because it's not as if he was talking to people who didn't believe in Islam, but he was speaking to an audience of people that were not, their Islam was dormant. It was not revived, right? It didn't have the moisture of life. And that's why when you look at how he structures his book, or his, calling it a book is a little bit misleading. His encyclopedia, his work, when you see how he structured it, you can tell that he's trying to really, really push people to recommit to their faith. He quotes the Qur'an, he quotes the Prophet ﷺ, he quotes the Sahaba, he quotes the generations that came after, and then he gives you these deep reflections. Almost as if to say like, come on, hasn't your soul been wanting this? Like, hasn't your soul been wanting this? So we decided, we were talking about what chapters to cover, because there's, again, he said there's 40 books. And so you can go through a variety of them. There's a lot of things to cover. We decided to start with the beginning, and maybe we can continue, inshallah, hopefully, and do some nice, almost like a mukhtasar of it, like we can go through bits and pieces and just have conversations about it, because the goal is that you walk away from here feeling that revived sense in your heart. Tonight, the topic is knowledge. When people hear knowledge, raise your hand if when you hear the word knowledge, you feel it's a very heavy thing. Almost like maybe intimidated. Raise your hand. Yeah, absolutely. When I was your age especially, right? When I heard knowledge, I was like, I have to change my clothes. I have to make wudu, which by the way is part of the impact of that substance. Inna sanulqi alayka qawlan thaqila, Allah Ta'ala said. One time Imam Malik was asked a question by somebody and he didn't give him an answer. He said, La adri, I don't know. And he said, Hada shay'un khafifun min al-ilm. Like, this is very light in knowledge. You should know the answer to this. Like, give me the fatwa. And Imam Malik started crying and he quoted that ayah that Allah Ta'ala says, we have revealed upon you a heavy speech. So yes, knowledge is heavy. It is. But you were built to carry heavy things. Allah Ta'ala, He told us this. عَلَّمَ الْإِنسَانَ مَا لَمْ يَعْلَمْ. Allah Ta'ala created the human being to be able to carry the weight of this revelation that came down from the heavens, from Him Subhanahu. So our goal tonight is to reintroduce ourselves to knowledge. Reintroduce. It's not like we're unknown. It's not like we grew a little bit far apart. It's okay. But let's talk a little bit about some of the, and I'm going to ask Mufti Abdul Rahman, we're going to go back and forth inshallah, about some of these beautiful things and why Al-Ghazali puts these things together and quotes them. So let's start, bismillah, with the first chapter in this book. So in the first section, he says that this is we're going to talk a little bit, and this is how he structures it. Instead of going straight into it, what are your responsibilities, what should you do, this and that, he says, let's just talk about, let's go to the reviews. You know when you want to go to a nice restaurant? What's the nicest restaurant in Detroit? Uh-oh. Malakul Kebab? No? What is the nicest one, man?
Most of these guys are eating random. They go to restaurants and just say halal on it.
Halal, so it's like a cheeseburger with like Takis inside of it, and it's like dipped in nacho cheese. And there was like a ring light, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, that's it. That's what I want to eat." And then you die for 3 days. You're like, "That was the worst thing I've ever." Okay, so the best restaurant. What do you do? Like, what do you do before you choose where you want to go eat? If you want to go somewhere nice, maybe you want to have a celebration, maybe somebody got engaged or somebody graduated or they got a new job. You look up the reviews and you want to see like, okay, what am I going to get if I go here? Like, what is the experience going to be like? And there's different things, right? Ambiance, right? Price, right? Food quality, etc. And they have pictures. You might even look at the menu. So Imam Al-Ghazali, he says, look, when it comes to knowledge, before we dive deep into it, let's first talk about it. Let's see what are the different favors and the different fruits and blessings that a person who even touches knowledge, grazes it, like very lightly, what will their life become like? Knowledge is not a speculation, it's not a theory, it's not abstract, it's very real. It's very real. So knowledge has practical implications, just like Mufti Sahib was saying. You put on your clothes and you realize, you don't say, I look good. You say what? Alhamdulillah. Allahumma. Oh Allah, just like you made my appearance beautiful, make my character beautiful. So knowledge has a transformative effect. So Imam Al-Ghazali, he starts by quoting some of these different things, just to put you in the right mindset, just to get you in the right sort of spiritual state. So he says, the first chapter, Fadilatul Ilm, he says, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Qur'an, this ayah he quotes, شَهِدَ اللَّهُ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ وَأُولُو الْعِلْمِ. And then he says, فَانْظُرْ كَيْفَ بَدَأَ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى بِنَفْسِهِ. Allahu Akbar. وَثَنَى بِمَلَائِكَتِهِ وَثَانِي بِمَلَائِكَتِهِ وَثُلُثَ بِأَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ. He says, look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he begins by mentioning himself. Allah Ta'ala, he quotes in the Qur'an that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala witnesses that there is nothing worthy of worship besides him. And then the angels also bear witness. And then he says, those people who have knowledge. And then Imam Al-Ghazali commenting says, isn't it so beautiful how Allah begins with himself, then the angels, and then third he goes to the people of knowledge. And then he adds this beautiful line. He says, he finishes in this way, or he concludes in this way, the ayah, بِهَذَا شَرَفًا وَفَضْلًا وَجَلَالًا وَنُبْلًا. He says that he did this to teach you and to show you that you are categorized with nobility, with dignity, with favor and grace, with might, right? He's saying what? This is the result of knowledge. Knowledge puts you in the company, in this way, right? Take it for figuratively, in the company of Allah and His angels. If you have knowledge, then you become someone that can even be mentioned by Him, subhanahu, just by mere virtue of the fact that you have knowledge. It changes you. You know, in English we say this, like, you are who you're with. You are who you're friends with. Imagine that you spend time, you commit some time in your life to commit to engaging with knowledge, the sacred knowledge, and as a result of that, what happens? Now you start to find yourself feeling that presence of Allah. What happens, Mufti Saab, when angels are present in your life? What happens? What happens to your life? When people say like, oh, make sure that when you go there, the angels will be around you. Or when we're in gatherings, angels descend from the heavens. What is that an indication of when a hadith or an ayah or a scholar says, the angels are present in this environment?
I mean, you're an angel with me right now.
Allahu Akbar. Listen.
You know, subhanAllah, like there's the hadith that comes to my mind is, Inna lil-masajidi awtada, al-malaikatu julasa'uhum. That these masjids, the homes of Allah, they have pillars, like the pillars that hold up the roof, but this is a figurative way of saying of people who always come to the masjid. They're the pillars of the masjid. And then the Prophet, he says, al-malaika julasa'uhum, that the angels are the ones who sit with them.
Allah.
The angels are their friends. So then he explains what that means. That if angels are your friends, that angels are in your circle, in ghabu yaftaqidunhum. If for some reason you're on a journey, you're not locally in your community, or something happens, you don't go to the masjid, the angels miss you. وَإِن مَرِضُوا أَعَادُوهُمْ. If you get sick, they come visit you. وَإِن كَانُوا فِي حَاجَةٍ أَعَانُوهُمْ. And if you need something, they make dua for you. يَسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. Like, of course, you know, Umar al-Khattab used to always seek out younger children who have not reached the age of puberty. They're innocent, they have no sins, and he would always ask them to make dua for him.
Allah.
Now, because they're innocent, imagine angels making dua for you. This is basically, and they
only do what Allah wants.
Exactly. So being in the presence of angels, I mean, the only thing that will come close to that is being in, if you know what the closest thing to that feeling would be to make sense of it is to be in the company of scholars, of someone who's close to Allah. You sit with them, you leave, you feel something. Like, you know, نظرنا إلى تلك الوجوه عشية فأشرقت الأرواح من حسن ما ترى. Right? Our scholars, they say that sometimes Imam Malik, he says كلما وجدت قساوة في قلبي نظرت إلى وجه محمد المنكدر. He says, you know, subhanAllah, every time I found myself to feel, you know, spiritually, and in his words, I found my heart to be hard or cold. I wouldn't go and listen to a lecture, you know, I just go in the presence of Muhammad al-Munkadir, who's like an angel for him. And I would just look at his face and I would be good for months. For months, you're good, like just by looking at him. And when people say to the Salaf al-Salihin, like, what made you get to this level that you're at right now? And their response was, we just saw their faces once. We witnessed, we saw their faces. So yeah, I mean, when you're in that presence and you see those people, like, we know what it feels like. You know why we know what it feels like? We know what the opposite feels like. You know, you know what the opposite feels like. How does it feel like to be around someone who's always negative? How does it feel like to be around someone who's always complaining? How does it feel like to be around someone who's always after something? Like it becomes like very overwhelming. As friends, you're growing up, and like it becomes. I mean, they're friends, but it's overwhelming. Like, come on, man, just say something good. But imagine the opposite of that, right? You just around these people. So unfortunately, Ustad, the thing is, like, I feel one of our teachers would say to us in Benuri Town, he would once, like, it happened twice when I was there. Like, he would sit in class. His name was Ma'ana Badakhshani. He was probably 100 years old now. Yeah, so at that time he was probably 80 something years old. And so he would sit down and he had this, he's Afghani, but his Arabic was like, he spoke perfect Arabic, right? And his Urdu was messed up. Urdu was like the Pathan Urdu, right? And so his teacher were people like Mufti Shafi Saab, Shaykh Yusuf bin Nouri, Mufti Wali Hassan Tonki, rahmatullah, these great scholars of that era. So he would sit down, and in the same place he's sitting teaching us, like these people taught him, all right? So he used to be on the other side. And so he's saying, he would sit down and he would look at all of us and he would say, I feel bad for all you guys. Right? He would start crying and he would say, I feel bad for you guys. Like, why? He says, someone like me is teaching you this book. This book, you know who taught me this book? And he would say their names. You know who I feel bad for? You guys. Like, you have to study this from us, from me.
Yeah,
you know, so basically when you spend time around them, it does give that amazing feeling to you.
And if you think of the angels, you know, the maxim that you said, like, you know things by their opposites. If you think of the angels, like, what would we qualitatively say is the opposite of being around an angel?
A devil?
A devil. And so we all know, again, like, the presence of things that are evil, right? The shayateen, we know what that does. الَّذِي وَسْوَسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ. You know, that he whispers, that he promises you all those negative things. He promises you poverty, he promises you pain, misery. That's the effect of shaitan, correct? So what's the effect of the malaika? And Shaykh Umar Sulaiman, mashallah, he produced that series a few years ago about, like, in the presence of angels, where he did 30 videos in Ramadan where he talked about what the presence of angels means. But realize you can't get that presence if you're not a person who's engaging with the substance that they're looking for. The angels are looking for something. You know, even the hadith, it mentions what? The angels are like roving the earth. They're looking for what? They're not looking for money. They're not looking for people of wealth. They're looking literally for gatherings where Allah's name is being mentioned. Because that is equivalent to knowledge. All knowledge is remembering Allah. So they're like looking, like they're hovering over the earth and the atmosphere. And imagine, like, you know how in these movies with space, astaghfirullah, movies, you know how in movies in space, they have like these, you know, it lights up bright, you know, like, oh, there's a huge like thing. And then they imagine the angels with their wings on the horizon. They see this gathering here in Warren, Michigan. Are you kidding me? What's in Warren, Michigan? Miftaah. And so then they descend upon the earth and then they gather. SubhanAllah, listen, they gather. Shaykh AbdulNasir described this so beautifully. He said, a lot of times you imagine it as like one column going to the heavens. He said, no, the entire earth. And then it expands outwards. And there's just malaika upon malaika. And they're climbing over each other. And they gather and they look and they start mentioning the names of every single person in this gathering. Start mentioning these names. And they're taking note for these names. And they're going to go report back. Allah is going to ask them, who was there? And they'll say, oh Allah, you know better, right? You're Allah, you're the creator. And then he says, tell me their names. And down the list, they go. And at the end of that report, at the end of the conclusion of the report of who was in Warren, Michigan on Thursday, Allah Ta'ala says, let it be known that I've forgiven them. Why? Why? It wasn't because it was the most popular restaurant at the time. It wasn't because it's where TikTok told you to go. It's because you came and sat in a room and you listened to something for a short amount of time, reflecting about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His book. This is what knowledge does. We have time, or is it Maghrib?
We have time.
We have time, just 2 minutes. Okay, next one. So he continues with the next one. And he says, he quotes another ayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, وَقَالَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. He says, Allah Ta'ala has elevated or raised, He will raise and elevate those who believe amongst you and those who were given knowledge by degrees. Now there's an interesting thing that we learn here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not mention things in pairs or things in triples or things. There's always going to be some kind of connection. So here there's two connections that the scholars mentioned. Number one is that there's a sequence, there's a prioritization. That not everyone who believes is necessarily someone who has what we would consider knowledge. Right? There's the believer, right? قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا. Allah made this clear in another chapter where He said, the Bedouins came, they said, we are mu'mineen, we are believers, we are mu'minun. And Allah Ta'ala says, no, don't say that. You're Muslims, you're not yet mu'min. Because mu'min requires a little bit more refinement of your Islam, right? Into Iman, with some knowledge, with some conviction. So Allah Ta'ala here is giving us two different categories of people. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ. Those people that have belief, yes, and those people that have been given knowledge. But the other connection, this is beautiful, is that if a person wants to be from amongst one of those categories, then they have to make sure they're from the other category too. If you want to have Iman, Knowledge is a requirement. If you want to actually know something about this deen, then you have to be a believer. Studying this deen as an Orientalist will never make sense. Like Daniel Pipes, I don't know if you guys know that name, but in our time, like growing up in college, he was the one pushing out all the Islamophobia articles. That was him. He was just sitting there, right? Like even Shaitan was impressed. He's like, wow. It's like, this guy, I should hire you, right? Pushing out all, and his Arabic, his understanding of balagha, his top notch. Probably better than even professors of Arabic. Like, he is very good at understanding the content. He probably has read through Al-Razi, Zamakhshari. He probably has covered all the tafasir without a doubt. Without a doubt. But what's the difference? Allah Ta'ala says in the Qur'an in Surah Al-Baqarah, يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. Allah, this Qur'an, it can be the source of someone's misguidance and deviation, or it can be the source of a lot of people's guidance. But Allah promises, وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. Not a single person who comes into contact with it will ever have to worry about being misguided unless they are an unapologetic and an unrepentant wrongdoer who doesn't care. The opposite of a mu'min. A mu'min, they do good, and when they fail, they feel so bad. They feel it. They're not perfect, but when they do bad, they feel bad. إِذَا صَرَّتْكَ حَسَنَتْكَ وَسَأَتْكَ سَيِّئَتْكَ فَأَنْتَ مُؤْمِنٌ. If you feel good when you do good, and you feel bad when you do bad, congratulations. فَأَنْتَ مُؤْمِنٌ. So he says here something beautiful. He quotes these two. The only way that you'll be able to feel good doing good is when you have knowledge. And the only way you'll be able to feel bad after a sin is when you have knowledge. Knowledge of what the good will do to you and what the bad will do to you. Knowledge of the distance that it creates for you or the proximity that it gives to you. Knowledge of the effect of this. Charity is a good thing, yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, we need more consensus on that. Charity is a good thing, yes or no? Yes. We need ijma' on this, okay? It's one of the pillars, so we have to say yes. Sadaqah is a good thing. But when you learn from the Prophet ﷺ that he says what? مَا نَقَصَ مِنَ الْمَالِ الصَّدَقَةِ. That your wealth will never be touched in a way that depreciates when you give charity. How many of us, we hear that, we say, man, charity is really cool. We know it's good, but you hear that, you're like, oh my God. And then we hear what? As-sadaqatu burhanun. Charity is the proof of what? That you believe in the promise of Allah. Then we learn what? Sadaqah is a shield. From what? From calamity. So when someone is afraid and they're scared, maybe they're waiting for a diagnosis maybe to come back or something, they give sadaqah. Why? Because of all the knowledge that they're starting to take bites from. And it changes their character, it changes their behavior. This is the example of someone who believes, and this is why Allah Ta'ala puts these two together.